Module 7, we're going to talk about sexually transmitted infections or STIs. We're going to explore what are STIs, how are they transmitted, and how you can reduce the risk of transmission. While a lot of people recognize pregnancy as an unintended risk or consequence that might come from sex, a lot of people don't consider STIs. So STIs are sexually transmitted infections. You might have heard the term STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. The same thing, sexually transmitted infections, is just the newer term we use. So STIs are basically any infection that can be transmitted through sexual activity, usually referring to genital contact or something that can come as a consequence of exchange of sexual fluids, including fluids from the penis and vagina, or the penis and the anus, or even in some cases with saliva. We'll discuss that in a second. So STIs, the way to remember it is that just the way some diseases or infections are transmitted from, let's say, food or water or through the air, sexually transmitted infections are generally transmitted through sexual activity. Now, which sexual activity would transmit an STI really varies depending on which activity we're talking about and which disease or infection we're talking about. Few things to consider are, let's say, kissing, for example, is an activity that is relatively low risk, but a few STIs like herpes, which can be transmitted pretty easily through oral contact. So could be oral contact between mouth to mouth contact, but also oral contact from a mouth to genitals, or someone with genital herpes could transmit STIs from genitals to someone's mouth. A few other common STIs are HPV, HIV, chlamydia. These STIs can be transmitted through oral sex, through vaginal sex, through anal sex, if there are no barrier methods being used. And we'll discuss ways to prevent STIs in just a moment. The other thing to remember is that most STIs tend to not have any symptoms at all. Just the way someone can get COVID-19 and not have symptoms, similarly someone with STIs can be carrying an STI and transmitting an STI without showing any symptoms at all. This is why we tend to encourage proactive STI testing. So even if you're not showing any symptoms, getting tested periodically, usually every time you change a partner is the recommended cadence, or once a year if you're in a long-term monogamous relationship, getting tested even without symptoms, just to check that in case you're carrying anything that might be asymptomatic, and make sure you have the all clear. More than that also is having open channels of communication with partners about STI testing. So making sure that your partners are on the same page in terms of how much risk you are both wanting to expose yourselves to, whether that's using barrier methods, whether that's getting tested, or even risks in terms of how many partners someone might have had before. This might not look like actually saying a number, but just sharing whether your risk levels might be high or low. One of the ways to reduce risk of pregnancy and STI transmission is to use barrier methods. Now, barrier methods are called barriers because they act as a barrier between sexual fluids. Now, you might hear this and think only penis and vagina intercourse requires barrier methods, but that's not necessarily true. While there may be no risk of pregnancy when two people with vulvas are having sex, or when two people with penises are having sex, there is still a risk of STI transmission. And so using barriers in those situations is also important. Similarly, oral sex might not have any risk of pregnancy, but can still have risk of STI transmission. So using barrier methods for oral sex as well can be helpful. So what are these barrier methods? Let's talk about that. So the most common barrier method is the external condom, which is a condom that is placed on the penis, and can be used both for anal sex as well as for vaginal sex. The other really common method is the internal condom. The internal condom is a condom that can be inserted inside the vaginal canal or front hole, or inside the anus for anal sex as well. Now, both of these are effective against STI transmission and also against pregnancy. But the thing to remember is that these are both not 100% always effective. There can be sometimes risk of breakage. The way to minimize that risk is to make sure you are inserting these or applying these correctly. The other thing to remember is that using both of these for oral sex is also important in order to reduce the risk of transmission. Now, it is difficult to use a condom for oral sex with a vulva. So what we recommend is cutting open the condom and creating a dental dam or like a little latex sheet which can be placed over the anus or over the vulva to have oral sex. And we'll demonstrate how to make one and how to use both of these in just a moment. Dental dams are one way to reduce the risk of STI transmission during oral sex with a vulva or an anus. So the way to make your own dental dam is you start with a condom. You make sure that it's not expired. You want to check the expiry date. You can feel and check if there's an air bubble so that you make sure it's not something that's damaged. And then you go ahead and open the condom packet and take it out. Remember, if you use something that is flavored around a vulva particularly, it could cause infections if someone is sensitive to the chemicals that create that flavoring. So you might want to use something that's relatively unflavored. And then in order to turn this into a dental dam, I'm going to spread this, unroll it just a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off the tip. Now, as you can see, this is a really slippery condom. You can also tear this with your teeth. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is now you can cut it now sideways or you can unroll it. I like to unroll it. So I'm going to go ahead and unroll it completely. And then cut this along the side. And when you're done with that, you should have almost like a little latex sheet. And this is the dental dam. So now this dental dam is something you can place between your mouth and the person's vulva when you're having oral sex, or between your mouth and someone's anus when you're giving oral sex to someone's anus. If you want to add some spice, you can also add some water-based lubricant on the person's body, and perhaps some flavored lubricant on the part that's facing your mouth. You want to also make sure that you're not flipping this and using it the other way around. Some people recommend writing something on one side just so that you know which side is the right side up. But we know that sometimes in the moment it's hard to do that. So you just want to make sure you remember which side is down and keep that side down throughout the whole time.